Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's event. I'm Laura Dillon with MS Dynamics World, and we're here today for a session all about intelligent customer support with Dynamics 365. Our presenters today are Shireen Reed and Paul Sheridan, both with Coveo, and it's great to have them here with us today. So as we get started, please know that we do welcome your questions today. You can enter them at any time during the presentation in the Q&A box on the right side of the event window. I know that Shireen and Paul will be leaving time at the end to answer as many of these as they can. So without any further delay, I'm going to hand things off to Shireen to get us started. Shireen?
Thank you, Laura. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Today we're going to present a roadmap for injecting more intelligence in our customer support processes. So before we dive in, I kind of just wanted to pause a moment and set the scene, if you will, to reflect on really where we've come from. So flash back a number of years ago, and if we look back, the best available method support agents had of noting and remembering what content was relevant amongst a stack of manuals was the famous Post-it note. And even better when those Post-it notes had different colors so that they could really color code and set up a system for the references to remember, best remember where important information was located. So obviously that was not the most scalable of solutions, and it really only helped that one agent go back to relevant information, and only if that said agent remembered his or her color coding scheme. So it didn't really help the agent across the room or maybe in another location. So flash forward to today, and I guess you could say we've greatly evolved since the Post-it note days. But now we have a number of systems, right? And the systems are better able to store and sort information. But unfortunately, we don't just have one system. We have many systems. And we don't just have a little data anymore, a few manuals, we have a lot. So when you look really in today's digital world, the pace at which data is created, it really grows exponentially every minute and if not every second. And because I was interested, I looked up a stat and I found something from IBM that stated that every day we actually create 2.5 quintillion bytes of data. So it's really hard to imagine what a quintillion byte equates to, but it's really definitely a lot. And this amazing pace of information creation, it's really not just limited to what's out there on the internet, right? But it also, it's related to also what gets created behind our own corporate walls. So if your company is like many others out there, I know ours included, you've accumulated really a wealth of information and data. And the problem is not just the abundance of data, but also it's scattered across these different silos of information. Another statistics that I came upon that was also interesting that was published is that on average, a customer support agent will need to consult between 5 to 20 different sources to get answers to solve a customer issue. So, you know, that might include things like accessing case histories in CRM system, bug tracking systems, forums, knowledge bases, communities, the list goes on, right? And this means really a big loss in terms of efficiency. So it pushes up your cost to serve. It really leads to frustrated support staff. And ultimately, you know, if you follow that through, it frustrated customers when issues take really a lot longer to resolve. So I'd like to, at this point, Laura, if you could launch the poll, we'd like to take a quick pulse of where you stand really on this spectrum. So in terms of how you feel of how easy it is for your support team to find the information that they need to support your customers. So 1 being, you know, almost impossible, all the way to 5 being super easy. So where you would feel along that spectrum. And we'll give you just, you know, a few seconds to kind of tag in your responses before we look at them. All right, Laura, are we about ready to close that poll?
Yeah, we can close it now, and it takes just a few seconds for WebEx to close it out. I think it gives people a little bit more time.
All right.
About 5 more seconds and I should be able to post them.
Perfect.
There we go. Can you see that?
All right. So I see most of you are kind of down in the middle there, but there's a small percentage that are also find it very hard. Nobody really filled out that easy or super easy spectrum. So I think that, some of the discussion that we're going to have today will be helpful and perhaps move you more towards that easy or super easy area in the spectrum. So thank you for that.
Sure.
So when we talk about a roadmap to intelligent assisted support, I think it's important that we first look at what we mean by that. So when we talk about intelligent, the intelligent piece, what we're really referring to means we're getting smarter about leveraging the knowledge that we already have in our systems and our people. We're using or tapping into machine learning, and I'll talk a little bit about that, what that means later on. I'll dive into that. But to look at, historical patterns of how people have solved problems, what information they've used to get to the right answers. And then the assisted piece is really all about automation. So delivering that information or that intelligence is in a more automated way. So to be able to proactively tell you what you need next, what to guide you, to recommend you to the next best thing, without you having to consciously memorize how to do that. So that's really the holy grail of what we're trying to get to. And today we'll look at kind of these 5 steps along the journey or the roadmap. And we'll go through each of them in turn. So the first one being establishing a good knowledge foundation. So how do we do that, right? So KCS, or knowledge-centered support, is one methodology to do that. And it's really a methodology that's been established for many years now by the Consortium for Service Innovation, for those of you that are not familiar with it. And it's become an industry-recognized best practice. A lot of research has gone into this, and there's a lot of leading companies really like Dell and HP and others that have really put this into practice. And at Coveo, we're actually lucky because we have a number of individuals who are KCS certified trainers. And so it's really part of the way we think and operate. And when you look at the KCS methodology, it's really a set of practices and processes that focus on knowledge as a key asset to the organization, right? So it's developing a collective knowledge base according to the collective knowledge of the organization. And the premise is that the best people to create the knowledge are the ones that are using it. So rather than, let's say, relegating it to a technical writing team. And also the best time we create content, that knowledge, is as we're solving problems. And so knowledge becomes a byproduct of that problem-solving process. And also, when we're focusing mostly on evolving content and improving content as it's being used. So as we're creating the knowledge, it might not be perfect, but we're continually updating it and curating it as we go forward, but only the information that we need. So there might be the 80-20 rule or 70-30 rule, where really that top 30% is the knowledge that we use on a daily basis and is most impactful. So that's what we're really improving on. And what's really interesting about KCS also is that it's really a cultural shift, right? So it's philosophy change. It's not something that we do in addition to solving problems, but it becomes kind of the way we solve problems. I think it's important to understand also, to underlay all of this, you really have to have a good process set up to capture and reuse knowledge. So if you're not able to do that really in the flow of work, so in a kind of a user-friendly, efficient, intuitive way, then it's really not going to catch on in your team, and it's going to hinder your overall effort. And when it comes to capturing that information, it's also important to capture it in context. And so to use the words that customers are describing when they're asking the questions and incorporating that into your knowledge articles. Or it could be looking at your customer self-service requests that are coming in. What are they searching for? What are the terms that they're searching on? And that's going to enable you to be more successful in creating a good knowledge foundation. And some of the benefits of KCS, I just wanted to outline them here because, you know, there has been a lot of research that's gone into this. And what we see is a number of operational improvements. So the average time to resolve really drops by 20 to 50%. And inversely, your support capacity increases by 20 to 50%, right? And if you're publishing that knowledge externally, this also has a really positive effect directly with your customers. As the process continues over time, you're creating more knowledge and making it available, and you end up with less of those, you know, known issues, the same old issues finding their way back into your support center. And you get more newer type of issues. So it becomes more interesting for the support team also, who's not always responding to the same, how do I reset my password, or whatever that typical question is that you always get. So you see here that it also results in improved employee retention, and that's a big part of it. All right, so that was the first part. The second part is really, of the equation is really about unifying that knowledge into a single view, right? So as we mentioned before, not all the answers will be found in one source. You have to be able to really find and search across all of knowledge-based articles, but also perhaps your self-service content, some documentation. It might be found in YouTube videos, customer community contributions. There's a vast array of different sources that we want to be able to tap into. And you want your support team to be able to execute that single search and pull in information from a number of different repositories and get the answer rather than having to memorize where to go to find it. You need to log into the different systems, you need to navigate around them in different formats. And if you are still doing that, it's very likely that you tend to be less efficient, right? And it drives up your costs. You need more support agents, and we all know that staffing is typically the highest cost in any support organization. All right, so let's move on to the third step in our roadmap. And I'm going to spend a little bit of time here because it's all about content in context. And why is content in context important? Well, we just talked about having that single unified source of knowledge, and that's gotten us a really good step ahead. But we still haven't addressed that famous fact that the sheer amount of information of data that's in these different repositories, we still have to contend with, right? So without having context around the content, then it's still difficult to be able to find the right information quickly. We're going to talk also a lot, you're going to hear us talk a lot about relevance. So I wanted to provide a definition of what does relevance really mean. And here it is. It says, relevance is the quality or state of being closely connected or appropriate. So it's really being connected with the matter at hand, whatever that might be. So it might be, in dealing with a case, an account, an employee, a customer. And also what's important to understand is relevance is in the eyes of the beholder. And so what may be relevant to me may not be relevant to you. And in today's world, I think we've come to expect that, right? A very personalized and relevant experience, just based on our own consumer experiences. You look at the likes of Google, Netflix, Amazon, they all have that one thing in common. And they deliver these great experiences, but it's not because they have good search. They succeed, and we tend to gravitate to these companies because they deliver relevance when we search. Netflix knows what I like, and it recommends other movies or shows I'd also like. Amazon does the same thing in terms of, with purchases. It suggests what I might need to go along with what I'm purchasing. And it's also based on what other people have paired with that particular item, right? So it's knowledge of the crowd as well that they're incorporating there. And this has really raised the bar for what we now expect and what we demand. Just quickly, if you compare the two, if we look at the impact of poor relevance versus rich relevance, we see that poor relevance can have some very negative impacts on your organization. It could mean that customers don't convert and they go elsewhere when, let's say, you're talking about a website. It can result in poor customer service. It means that your cost center costs go up, your customer satisfaction goes down. By contrast, if you look at rich relevance, It really lets people achieve more on their own, and it lets them solve more complex problems, find what they really need more readily, and they can learn and buy and do more on their own. And I like to also think back to the KCS, right? Knowledge Center Support. In order to truly support the core principles of KCS, they say that we really need to be able to respond at the speed of talk. What does that mean at the speed of talk? It means that the information needs to be right there. We need to be able to find the most relevant content that's important to our particular question. And I know myself, if I call into a support center and I end up on the line and being put on hold for minutes on end while the support agent is looking up information, I get rather frustrated. So how do we achieve this famous relevance? Well, at Coveo, we have a formula that we follow, and we've kind of laid out here. So the first step is all about indexing the content and the knowledge from across the organization, and we do this through a vast set of connectors and tools that we've built up over the last decade. So we're able to go in and get information very easily, very quickly from like SharePoint, OneDrive, Lithium, the list goes on, right? So all of those different sources. And then we combine this with the context of your customers and your staff. So what are they trying to do? What apps are they using? What time of day is it? Where are they located maybe geographically? So any contextual clues that we can gather from that. And then we combine it with their behavioral data. So, based on where people have come in, what they've searched on, what's worked for their other cohorts, their other digital soulmates, we like to call them. We really analyze that whole clickstream data that comes through. And when you put all this together, it equates to really more relevant, personalized content, right? But it's not something that you can do by hand. It really needs the power of machine learning. And I touched on that earlier, and I know if you're like me, you can't go a day without seeing an article or something mentioned about machine learning or AI. It seems to be the buzzword of the day. So, but what do we mean, right, when we say machine learning in the context of search and how it can help you? And it's really about being able to tap into the knowledge of your team and your customers. So it's all about analyzing the patterns of search, the results, and looking at what's successful, and then learning from that, and then automatically adjusting the results without you having to do anything. So they're optimized, and then the learning process continues so that it gets better and better. The best example of this is we've all had the experience where we go to Google, we type something in, and we may even misspell it, or we don't even complete typing the sentence. And then we see our question already completed for us in one of the drop-downs suggested, right? So Google has already anticipated what we're going to ask about. And it really does this by tapping into that automated learning from past users, and it knows what's most popular and what people have been looking for, and it uses that to help us achieve the results that we want. So when we look at this in more of a support agent context, you have an agent that comes along that asks, how do I help this customer fix their printer issue, whatever that might be. And initially what they're served up is organic results. So, they could click on the last one, they could go through a few pages, they could go click on the fifth one, but ultimately they're going to find what works and they're going to solve the problem. But what happens thereafter is that the system learns that result that they clicked on is a better result, and then it automatically promotes that to the top of the list so that over time it becomes the first answer on the list. And also, when you think of machine learning in the context of support use case again, if we could look and analyze case history, we'll probably see that a very high percentage of those issues or problems that have happened before, right? So chances are that the issue's been asked or the question's been asked and it's been answered. But the person that's answered the question may be on the other side of the world or with many so many distributed support setups, they could even be working from home. So you can't necessarily stand up and shout over the cubicle, this is the answer. So understanding how a similar case was previously solved and being able to automate that recommendation can really help you address those issues that have been already solved before. And Paul's going to be showing a little of what that looks like in Dynamics shortly when he does his brief demonstration. I also wanted to point out that relevance through machine learning is also able to kind of anticipate the concept or the topic that you're looking at, the idea, and not necessarily exactly based on exactly what you've put in terms of writing in your question. So that can really help in the case of when you're looking at new employees on the job. They might be a little fuzzy what they're looking for. This can really help direct them to the right content without necessarily having all the background knowledge and expertise of, let's say, a seasoned support person. It really helps to upskill agents more quickly. So we've talked now a lot about the internal or agent view, but when we talk about self-service experiences, we usually split them up into these three different areas. So you have the internal experience, the public experience, and the partner experience. And overall, your support strategy really encompasses all of these pieces. So now I want to kind of switch gears and look a little bit at the public experience. So where customers consume and interact with your content. And it's important to understand how relevance impacts your customers as well. So this is a very busy slide. TSIA conducts a yearly channel preference survey, and they ask their members and some general industry a series of questions. And one of the main questions from the survey is, what is your preferred channel for product support? And if you look at 2017 data, which is in orange, versus 2018 data, which is in blue, what I really wanted to call out in this slide is you can see the self-service preference shows significant growth coming into 2018. And not only the self-service itself, but self-service features like chat, communities that come or rely on self-service. And way down on the bottom, we see email and phone on the graph. And email is in the last place. And as far as customers and their preference, it's really not the most preferred way. Yet email is still a channel that a lot of companies provide, and they still believe that it's the preferred channel. And there's some good news with all this. So the good news is that also looking at TSIA benchmark report, strong self-service actually reduces your cost per incident. You can see here $189 versus weak self-service, which is $232. And it also leads to an increase in employee satisfaction and lower attrition rate. And there's some other data as well. I just wanted to share those few little tidbits with you. And to see that it really is, a strong self-service really is beneficial to the organization. But there's some bad news that goes along with that. So even though it costs less and it's the preferred channel and it helps with employee satisfaction, self-service has the lowest satisfaction of any of the support channels. And so why is that? And if we look a little bit on what's been identified on the right-hand side here, it has to do with really a lack of unified search provided for that channel. And also companies not indexing their content with Google. And if I take you back those 2 slides ago when we looked at the preferred channel, I don't know if you noticed that Google went from 0 in 2017 to 12% in 2018 as preferred channel. So it's really, that's a significant jump. So what it means is customers may not even be going to your site to find information, right? So they're using Google to find their answers. And yet a high percentage of companies, 2/3, still don't even index their knowledge or their knowledge base or their articles with Google. The other big issue area here that you see is inadequate knowledge management. So not having a good curation process or update process for the knowledge that's being published. And I know when we talk about KCS, one of the goals that they put forward, which is kind of ambitious, but still it's a goal nonetheless, is to publish 90% of that knowledge within 90 minutes. So once you solve an issue, to have that resolution or that knowledge article published within 90 minutes of having it. If you look at also specifically on content gaps, so that means 36% of companies have no automated way to identify content gaps. So customers are coming to your site, they're searching for information, and it doesn't exist. So they don't find it and they leave. Maybe they leave, they're dissatisfied, or maybe they then go ahead and log a support call, right? And that drives up your cost again. So getting back to the slide that I showed before, in order to improve your customer self-service experience, you really want to ease the process for them. So you want to provide them with the same type of AI-powered search across all the available knowledge in a unified way. So the same thing that we supply for support agents, we also need to supply for the customers coming into your self-service portal. You want to be able to suggest content to them based on what's helped others, and ultimately you want to be able to offer recommendations, whether that be in the form of articles or training, that really delivers the best support experience possible with the least effort on their part. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Paul, who's going to provide you with a demonstration and show you what that looks like in Dynamics.
Great. Thank you, Shireen. Really appreciate all of that. 1 second, and I will have my screen. Great. So as Shireen was saying, there's a focus on both self-service and also agent productivity with regard to content, with regard to relevance, with regard to being able to find what's necessary in order to do your job, your task, whether it's serving yourself or, of course, serving your customers. Since, of course, this session is very much focused on Microsoft Dynamics as a CRM platform, we're going to focus our short demonstration on the efficiency of providing relevant access to relevant content on Microsoft Dynamics as a platform. And I'll start off here, the first of two brief demo sections, looking at a Microsoft Dynamics portal. So this is a standard Microsoft Dynamics portal, which is giving users access to knowledge articles, to SharePoint content, to cases potentially if they're logged in, as I am currently, and also to other forms of content. And I think Shireen emphasized very well that it's really important to be able to give your customers and your agents access to all of this information, to the most relevant information. So an ability here to, for example, start to search for content. You come to your knowledge base, and clearly being able to navigate and move around, click links, and so on is important. But people have been well trained, again, as Shireen said, by the Googles of the world and the Netflixes of the world and so on, to expect excellent search behavior. So, for example, I might have a problem with a device. I've got a Speedbit fitness tracker, and I'm having a problem with it skipping floors. I'm going up and down the stairs trying to count lots and lots of steps, and it's not working properly. So one of the common things that people expect from a search technology, from a knowledge-based technology, is the ability to do type-ahead query suggestion. As you can see here.
Excuse me, Paul?
Please.
Paul, can you hear me? This is Laura. If you could speak up a little bit more, I think some of the attendees are having a little bit of a difficult time hearing you. Maybe get closer to the mic or turn up your volume. That would be great.
Thank you. I will do my best to do that.
Okay, thanks, Paul.
Thank you. So as we can see here, type-ahead query suggestion, certainly an important part of any knowledge-based self-service type application, including this Microsoft Dynamics portal. I can select what is being suggested to me, or of course simply do my standard query. And what you're going to get back here is, again, a richly relevant set of results. There are ways in which you can promote manual rules to boost certain kinds of content, the most effective content, and of course, with advanced systems like what we're showing here, the ability to learn from user behavior to automatically promote the most effective content, the content that has helped people to serve themselves most effectively, to avoid creating cases, and so on. I think you also want to be able to allow the user to navigate well within search results, to be able to select, to filter results based on things like date or language, perhaps what location the content is stored in, and also to understand whether or not they're looking for example, manuals or instructional videos. All of this content is excellent content. It may not all be in one place. It may not all be in your CRM system or your knowledge base. So the ability to unify access to all of this content is super important to providing effective self-service. And I think Shireen emphasized really well the interesting dichotomy, perhaps, around self-service. It's what people prefer to use, but they really generally don't like how it's implemented. But there are lots of great tools out there to do exactly that, whether your content is in your Dynamics CRM system, it's in your Dynamics KB articles, it's in videos on YouTube, and so on. All that information can and should be unified in your self-service experience. Now, of course, as you go a step beyond simply searching for information, finding your useful information, there are cases, of course, where you want to be able to create a support case. And I think it's really important also to embed into the case creation process a really effective way of deflecting support cases. And this is a nice example, once again, embedded into Microsoft Dynamics portal, whereby as I start to create my support case, I haven't found what I was looking for regarding that skipping floors issue. So I'll start to type in my case here. I'm giving it a title and perhaps a description. But what we'll see here on the right-hand side is recommended results. These may be knowledge articles, knowledge-based articles coming out of SharePoint. They may be, again, videos, any kind of useful content that this logged-in user, myself, has access to is going to be helpful to help a person deflect or avoid creating that support case. The other really important aspect to this, I think, is tracking what's going on. I'm filling in a support case form. I don't feel like I'm doing a search necessarily. But this information, what I'm putting into the form, whether I actually hit that submit case button or the cancel button or simply abandon my session, that needs to be logged so that the organization understands what are people having problems with, what are they creating cases around, or starting to create a case, but based on the content that's shown to them and perhaps what pages they click on, what documents they click on, what kind of action do they take afterwards? Do they create a case? Do they cancel the case? Do they abandon the session? That sort of information is gold for the support organization. It helps you to understand where you might have gaps in your knowledge, in your content that you're publishing, where you need to create new articles, new issues that are coming up in your customer base, and it helps you understand what content is most effective. And I think that's really important both from a reporting and analytics point of view. It's good to know what content is good. That's also what feeds into, in this case, machine learning in order to automatically boost that good content. Let's promote the stuff, the pages, the documents, the videos automatically that are in fact being effective, that are helping users to in fact self-serve and prevent the actual creation of a case. So it's really important to be able to report on that sort of information as well. And here's some examples of the sort of dashboards and reports that we can provide around case deflection and case creation. So again, logging that information, what documents are people looking at the most perhaps? Where are my content gaps? I'm starting to type in these queries. I'm not getting results, or I'm not getting results that I'm clicking on. So these are opportunities perhaps for the organization to create new content to address common issues. With that, Shireen, I'll hand it back to you to continue the session.
All right. Thank you, Paul. So getting back to our roadmap, where Paul just touched on a bit, the first step is really an important step, because based on all of that data that's been coming in and what people have been searching on and what they've found and what they've not found, we now can have a lot of insight, right, into those individual search journeys, and we put it all together, can really be powerful. So we can get information like, how are agents interacting with the knowledge base, the content? What are they attaching to cases that are helping them? teams are using the content successfully. So maybe they can offer some best practices to others. And we've talked a lot about machine learning and how it can help us automate and get the most relevant results promoted to the top. But what happens when people are searching for content that doesn't exist? And we touched on that briefly. Like, there are content gaps. Well, this can be a big aha moment for people. And when they realize that there's information that people need and they don't actually have the content to support it. And getting an understanding of that through, an analytics kind of framework is really, really important. Then you can go back and you can, improve content that you have, making it more robust, or you can author or index new content to make sure that people are really finding that information that they need, right? So over time, you can make that trend downwards. And some of the other data that we benchmark is also showing here. So things like query click-through rate. So the percentage of searches with at least one open document from the search result. Average click rank. And you see here in the light blue circle some of the benchmark data that we collect in terms of, what's really best of breed, best in class. And it's really you want your click rank to be in the first 3 results. So anything below that is really not showing true relevance. Another measure we look at is visit click-through. So looking at the entire visit, let's say at a self-service site, for example, like Paul just showed, and the percentage of visits with at least one search and one open document from the search results. So that's a little bit about monitoring and measuring. And finally, when we look at the last step of the roadmap, it's really about enabling that virtuous improvement cycle. So looking across all of your customer experiences, because these are really interconnected. And at this point, I just want to offer you a bit of a story. I had an interesting conversation with one of our customers the other day, and she was telling me how she used this data, search data, to drive her editorial content strategy. So I found that intriguing, and what she told me is she would look at the most popular terms that her customers were searching on in their newsletter that had no corresponding articles. And then based on that, she created new articles on those topics for subsequent newsletters. And what she discovered was that inevitably, those articles that she created based on that were the most popular and resulted in the most conversions. So she was really using that actionable insight and creating content and curating that accordingly. And what we've seen also, within Coveo, there's this trend upwards. More and more requests are coming in from customers that want to have more dedicated time with a customer success manager. And at Coveo, the customer success manager is really the person who's going to help you dive into the data, suggest dashboards, look at where trends are happening, anomalies maybe, and really kind of help the customers make sense of what's in front of them. So it's important to have the data at our fingertips, but really unless we analyze it and use it, then we're not learning and improving. So, Paul, are you ready to do the final demo?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'll hand it back over to you.
So what I wanted to do once again was to go back and show you a little bit of the usage analytics in a little more detail as well, but also to show you the relevance within the context of a customer support agent. We showed you sort of the case deflection process, how relevance impacts a user who's simply searching for information on your company's website, on your company's knowledge base, how they can be helped to deflect cases, to not create support cases, and how to understand the information that's being returned to them. But also it's important, of course, to be able to empower your agents, as Shireen was saying, to find the right information, where they're working, from wherever. This is an interesting example of, again, Coveo as a technology implemented within Microsoft Dynamics CRM. So as an example, I'm looking at the support case that the customer created around this particular problem of this speedbit device. What we're seeing on the right-hand panel, this is really Coveo as a technology, once again, pulling in information that is relevant to this particular case. So what we're doing is automatically looking at the content of this case, the details, the title, the description, and so on, and searching across a wide variety of data sources some of which are accessible to the external customer, of course, but some of them are not. They're internal documents, information, knowledge articles that have been created for use within the support organization. And of course, given that you have a relatively small amount of screen space available in such an instance, you'll see that. Let me go back to my original screen here. You'll see that the information being provided is in a relatively small amount of screen space here. So you need to make the best possible use of that, and also empower the agents to make use of this content once they've found it. So I haven't actually explicitly done a search. This is all stuff that's relevant to the case that I'm working on. But I can not only find it, look at it, go through the articles and such, I can also take action on it, whether it's to have a quick view, just a little snippet of the document itself. I can link the document to the case for knowledge articles and such. I can link the article to the case directly. I can also simply add it as a note to the support case. This is, empowering the agents to take advantage of all the information that's there, that's available to them, in order to help solve the customer's case without having to swap, Alt-Tab from one window or one application to another. This is relevance and search capability baked right into a dynamic CRM support application. We can also look once again at the impact that can have from an analytical point of view, once again, to understand, once again, case deflection, but also case resolution information. What are the most popular documents, the most popular searches from the point of view of the agent? What are the top applications or products, perhaps, if they have a multi-product organization, in terms of utilization, both by agents and by customer support, by customers themselves? We talked a little earlier about content gaps. What are people looking for or trying to create cases around when they're not finding any content? And of course, the same kind of thing applies to the agent experience as well. Also important to understand the quality of your content. What are the documents, the pages that people are looking at, but they're still creating a support case, or that they're avoiding creating a support case? And of course, also in terms of adoption by your agents, understanding what are the top documents, the top queries and such that are in fact linked to case resolution. So this, again, taking advantage of relevance both from the externally facing experience and the internally facing experience, and the all-important ability to measure and improve your processes by understanding search, by understanding case deflection in context of your CRM application. With that, Shireen, I will hand back over to you to wrap things up, I suppose.
Thanks, Paul. All right. So to kind of bring all the pieces together, I'd like to put this in context of what we call the Coveo Relevance Maturity Model. So if you look here on the vertical axis, it's really based on positive business impact. And if you look at the horizontal axis, it's moving from left to right, from reactive to predictive. So if you start here on the bottom left in the red zone, when you're searching across your separate systems, it's really inefficient and resource intensive. So we believe it's actually a negative in terms of business impact. And to get really above the waterline, you need at least to unify and rank your content in a single index so that you can be more responsive and provide the content that's really easy to navigate by users. And then as you move up into the right, you're able to leverage machine learning and analytics to really tune that relevance. There's a lot that you can actually do to also put your own business kind of logic in that. I mean, we haven't covered it today with Paul, but you can do that as well. And so you're using machine learning and you're using your own business knowledge to then offer more contextually relevant content. And the more you move up into the right of the curve, you get at the point where you're able to recommend and predict based on what's been successful with other previous journeys. So I'd like to look at, just for a moment before we get to the Q&A portion, is I would just want to highlight some actual results, because theory is one thing, but what can it mean in terms of the actual impact on some of the metrics that we talked about earlier on, like cost to serve, customer satisfaction? So here's a few examples of what some of our customers have achieved by implementing some of what we've discussed today. So you can see them here. The one that I just wanted to call out is Tyler Technologies. And Tyler is an interesting case. And for those who don't know who Tyler is, they're a large U.S. Provider of integrated software and technology solutions, and they really focus on the public sector. So we're talking cities, counties, states. They do really everything from allowing you to pay your tax bills online to payroll and utility billing. And they actually started this whole process a few years back, and they really wanted to embark on this KCS journey. And as part of that, they realized that they needed a single CRM system, and they chose Microsoft Dynamics 365 to do that. And then along the way, they discovered Coveo, and their use case with Coveo really is centered on empowering that support staff to access, a vast amount of data across lots of different siloed systems. And they were founded about over 50 years ago, and they've grown substantially in the last few years based on acquisitions. So if you're a company that's been through that, you know what they probably faced. So they had not only these decades of accumulated data, but they also had this extensive mixture of commercial software, homegrown, a variety of technologies. And they needed to, rather than migrate all this data and all this information, they really needed to be able to tap into those knowledge sources and give their agents contextual relevance across all of their content. And they implemented it, and within 1 quarter, they already had a 10% improvement in their first call resolution. And that's only after about 2-3 months of using this. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Laura, and you'll see on the screen here you have some additional resources. We have an upcoming live demo if you want to really see more of what our solution is within Dynamics. We invite you to come on Wednesday, June 13th. And if you want some more information or some more data, we'd be happy to provide it for you. Just reach out to us at webinar@coveo.com. So I'll hand it over to you, Laura.
Great. Thank you, Shireen.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. That was great information. Paul, thank you for the demo as well. So we've got a few minutes here. If anybody has any questions they would like to ask either Shireen or Paul, you can type those into the Q&A box there on the right. We'll take a look and see what we have coming in. Let's see. Here's a question. In terms of security, how do you manage what each person can search on in each system and then what customers see?
I'd be happy to take that here. This is Paul once again. Of course, in terms of indexing content, security is extremely important. Coveo does, out of the box, respect the security of the underlying repositories, be that Dynamics CRM, SharePoint, etc. You can also, of course, add a more, with the goal that only customers, for example, can only see cases that presumably they have logged or they've been given access to in Dynamics CRM or knowledge articles along as well. You can also set sort of higher grained security permissions, if you will, so that, for example, you might not want to allow any of your customers to see any cases. So that level of permissions definition can also be layered in there as well. But by default, absolutely, security is super important, and we do respect the security of the underlying repositories.
Good. Okay, thanks. Let's see what else we have here. Yeah, okay, so what is the difference between Azure Search, Dynamics Relevant Search, and Coveo Search?
Well, that's an excellent question as well. There are quite a long list of differences, but I'll try and hit the high points primarily. So the ability to, well, certainly index content inside and outside of Dynamics is something that Coveo brings to the table as a really major differentiator with Dynamics Relevant Search, or I guess what they also call Dynamics Categorized Search. That's not really something that's there. With Azure Search, you can potentially build connectors to other data sources. With Coveo, we've already built those things. So connectivity, Shireen had talked about content, context, and insights based on based on user behavior, really adding up to relevance. That's kind of addressing the content aspect of things. Coveo then also is able to certainly leverage the user's context more effectively to have an influence on results, whether by defining rules or again via machine learning. That sort of customization of relevance based on user context is something that's a big differentiator as well. Tunable search behavior, I guess, is another way you might look at that. Being able to configure your layout, your search layout, whether it's, again, the agent experience or the portal experience, big difference there, much more doable with Coveo. And just relevance, the ability to find content. We've done some side-by-side comparisons, which we'd be happy to share with you in perhaps another session if you join our call in a couple of weeks. And the standard dynamic search really doesn't find the most relevant content at all. It's more of an individual keyword kind of search. So some of those more advanced search features that are just inherent in a more modern system like Coveo are pretty key. And finally, I guess the relevance tuning based on machine learning, really just something that's not there in Azure or Dynamics standard search as well. And we'd be thrilled to be able to show you some examples of the impact that can have on relevance if you reach out to us once again.
Thanks, Paul. Here's a question that came in. Can you separate content by brand? The person that asked this says our company produces 3 different brand products.
Absolutely. So typically the way that we'd look at doing that is when your content is produced, when it's tagged, Coveo is not the content repository exactly. We're the search index for those repositories. So if, for example, you're creating knowledge articles or KB articles in Dynamics, you would tag that content with metadata, a field of some sort to say what brand each piece of content is. Coveo can index these metadata fields, and you can expose those to the user in a variety of ways. I really briefly showed you the concepts of filters or facets on a search page to allow you to drill down to particular kinds of content. Brand would certainly be a great example of a field to use as a facet. There are, of course, other ways in which you could do this as well. So if a user is logged in, for example, be they an agent or an end user on your support portal, if they're logged in and you're able to pull from their customer record, perhaps in Dynamics as well, information about what brands they own, what products they own, you could pass that information to Coveo so that we could automatically filter the results for them, or at least pre-select that facet to say, oh, hey, we know you own brand A, so let's focus our results on that particular brand. So there's a lot of interesting things you can do there to really make the customer experience or the agent experience much more frictionless, I guess, if that's the right word to use. I hope that helps to address your question.
Thanks. And here's one. Someone asked, is integration needed to get all sources of information together in D365?
I'll answer that in a couple of sentences, perhaps, or a couple ways. Integration. Coveo does build a set of connectors for about 40 different kinds of data sources. So again, things like SharePoint, things like websites, and things like various community platforms like Lithium. So these are connectors that we support, that we have developed, that integrate with these content sources. That is to say, you configure your instance of Coveo to point at this, at your Lithium community or your SharePoint firm. But it doesn't require integration in the sense of development per se. It's a connector. It's something that we support. Again, we're not importing the content from, say, SharePoint into Dynamics. We're building an index that points at both of these sources and allows a user to search securely across all of that content. Now, there are also some connectors that are more general purpose. So as mentioned, we have about 40 different connectors for different kinds of applications. We also have some connectors that are more general purpose. So being able to index a website, crawl a website, or index a sitemap, for example. And there's some configuration that you'd want to do there in order to pull out the right parts of content, the right metadata, for example, from a website. So that's a connector that requires perhaps a bit of configuration rather than customization to really index the content effectively. Again, I hope that addresses the specific nature of your question, but please feel free to clarify if you need more.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, Paul, because I'm not sure if what they were asking, but if it's around, if integration is required within Dynamics itself, the answer would be no, right? So this is already, yeah. You go to the global search box.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
That's a great one to bring. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So we do have an out-of-the-box but configurable, that sort of insight panel, if you will, that I briefly showed within the Dynamics agent experience. That is something that's available from the Microsoft Web Store, this integration into Dynamics from the point of view of the user interface. Now, you can certainly, and you probably would, do some configuration to really make that suit the nature of your content, what data sources you're dealing with, what filters or facets you want to make available, other sorts of options like that. But the code, if you will, that's something that's written. That's something that's available to you. And there are also similar components for the portal view, for the customer view. Again, you can configure them. You probably will to suit your particular needs, but it's not something you have to develop. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
No problem. And just to clarify, once Coveo is installed, you simply choose that option within your Dynamics environment, and your global search box becomes, it searches through Coveo and not the typical Dynamics.
Yeah, that's correct as well. So in addition to that insight panel view, Coveo can also take over, if you will, the global search box at the top of the Dynamics CRM interface as well.
Good, thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions coming in. I'll do one last call. If you've got something else you'd like to have Paul or Shireen address, now's the time. That was great information, great Q&A too. Appreciate all those questions that came in. I think we'll end this session here. Thank you both very much for your time today. So everyone knows we did record today's session, and we'll be sharing that in the next day or two. And then one other thing, when you log out of this session today, a very brief survey will pop up. If you could just take a couple of seconds, it's only 2 or 3 questions. The feedback does help us here at MSDW, and it helps our presenters as well. So we appreciate you doing that. And with that, we'll end there. Have a great day, everybody.